December 7, 1941. The sky over Pearl Harbor is black with smoke. Battleship Row is a graveyard of twisted steel and burning oil. The Imperial Japanese Navy steams east, laughing, certain they've knocked America out of the Pacific for at least a year. They have no idea what they just woke up. Because while those old battleships settle to the mud, 300 miles away the carriers Enterprise and Lexington are already racing toward the fight at 33 knots, flight decks hungry. The Japanese struck the fleet they could see. They never touched the fleet that matters. And that fleet is about to teach the world a brand new kind of war. 5 months later, April 18, 1942. 700 miles from Tokyo, the carrier Hornet points her bow into the wind. 16 Army B-25 bombers, heavy as houses, claw into the sky. Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle leads them straight toward the Emperor's palace. When the first bombs fall on the Japanese capital, every general in Tokyo drops his teacup. They swore the home islands were untouchable. That morning they learned different. One of Doolittle's pilots, Lieutenant Travis Hoover, writes in his diary that night, "We just told 1 billion people the war is coming to their doorstep. And we delivered the message in person." The shock wave rolls all the way to Admiral Yamamoto's flagship. He stares at the map and says the words that will haunt Japan for the rest of the war. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." He's right. And the giant is already on his feet. Fast forward 2 weeks. The Coral Sea. For the first time in history, 2 carrier forces fight a battle without ever seeing each other. Planes do all the killing. American pilots from Lexington and Yorktown tear into the Japanese invasion force bound for Port Moresby. Lieutenant Commander Bob Dixon spots the light carrier Shoho and keys his mic. "Scratch one flat top." In 4 minutes she's gone, swallowed by the sea. The big carrier Shokaku limps away with 3 bombs in her guts. The invasion is cancelled. Japan has just lost its first strategic battle of World War II, and they never even got close enough to fire a gun at an American ship. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan still thinks carriers are delicate raiding toys. They're about to learn what happens when America builds them by the dozens and runs them flat out. June 3, 1942. American codebreakers hand Admiral Chester Nimitz the gift of a lifetime. They know exactly where Yamamoto is bringing 4 of Japan's 6 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, to crush Midway and finish the job they started at Pearl Harbor. Nimitz has 3 carriers. One of them, Yorktown, is still smoking from Coral Sea damage. Shipyard workers in Pearl Harbor give her 3 days of repairs that were supposed to take 3 months. On June 4 she's back at sea, flight deck patched with steel plates and prayers. Dawn, June 4. The Japanese launch 108 planes against Midway Island, expecting a cakewalk. Instead, Marine fighters throw themselves straight into the teeth of the storm. Captain Marion Carl and his squadron of Brewster Buffaloes, flying coffins everyone calls them, charge 30 Zeros head-on. 6 Marines die in minutes, but they break up the attack and buy the one thing America needs most: time. 200 miles away, Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet finds the Japanese fleet first. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron looks at his 15 Devastators, turns to his gunner, and says, "Boys, if only one plane gets through, it'll be worth it." They fly straight down the throat of the enemy. Zeros rip them apart. Not one torpedo hits. Every plane goes down. Ensign George Gay is the only survivor, clinging to a seat cushion, watching the rest of the battle through the smoke. But those 15 men just pulled every Japanese fighter down to the deck. And that's the exact moment 37 Dauntless dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown arrive at 19,000 feet, unseen. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey spots the enemy carriers below and screams over the radio, "Attack! Follow me!" They roll in almost vertically. In 6 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers are on fire. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu. Their flight decks become infernos. Flight crews trapped below never have a chance. Hiryu strikes back, mortally wounds Yorktown, but by sunset she too is burning under bombs from Enterprise. 4 fleet carriers, the same 4 that hit Pearl Harbor, gone in a single morning. The Imperial Japanese Navy just lost the war in one day, and they don't even know it yet. Ensign George Gay, floating in his life raft, watches Enterprise's planes come home and whispers, "Thank God for those guys up there." That's the American Navy in 1942. One man floating in the ocean, still cheering for his buddies. Japan reels, but they still hold the Solomon Islands. August 7, 1942. The 1st Marine Division storms Guadalcanal. They seize a half-finished Japanese airfield and name it Henderson Field. Then the transports pull out fast. Japanese warships are already screaming down from Rabaul. That night, Admiral Mikawa smashes 4 Allied cruisers off Savo Island in 37 brutal minutes. Over 1,000 American sailors die. The Marines wake up alone, surrounded, staring at 20,000 Japanese across the jungle. But the carriers are coming. Enterprise, Saratoga, Wasp, Task Force 61, take station east of the Solomons. Every day the Cactus Air Force on Henderson throws everything with wings at the enemy. Every day the fast carriers stand ready to stop the Tokyo Express cold. October 26, 1942. Battle of Santa Cruz. Japan throws everything they have left. 4 carriers, hundreds of planes, to knock out Henderson Field for good. American scouts find them first. Swede Vejtasa in a Dauntless shoots down 7 Zeros in one fight. 7, then calmly bombs a cruiser and flies home. They pin the Navy Cross on him while the ship is still steaming. But the Japanese hit Hornet hard. Bombs, torpedoes, fires everywhere. Captain Charles Mason refuses to leave the bridge while his men get off. When the order finally comes to abandon ship, he's the last man down the line. Destroyers pump 8 torpedoes and 400 shells into the dying carrier rather than let Japan have her. Hornet rolls over and sinks at sunset. The flight deck crews stand on the destroyer's fantail, hats in hand, tears cutting tracks through the oil on their faces. Enterprise takes hit after hit and keeps fighting. Damage control parties beat out fires with their bare hands. Big E lives to fight another day, and in the exchange Japan loses another 100 pilots they can never replace. American factories are already building tomorrow's carriers tonight. 2 weeks later, November 1942. Admiral Tanaka tries one last run to reinforce Guadalcanal, 11 fast transports loaded with troops. Waiting in the dark is Admiral Willis Ching Lee with battleships Washington and South Dakota, screening Enterprise. Radar lights up the night. Washington opens fire at 23,000 yards, 14 miles. 9 salvos, 19 direct hits. The Japanese battleship Kirishima simply explodes and sinks in minutes. Tanaka turns tail. Guadalcanal is saved. The Marines on that island never forget. Gene Sledge writes in his helmet diary, "When we heard those Navy planes overhead, we knew we weren't alone anymore." By early 1943 the Japanese High Command is in full panic. American carriers appear out of nowhere, strike, vanish. Admiral Yamamoto writes that the enemy moves like ghosts across the water. They're not ghosts. They're Essex-class carriers launching every few weeks, Hellcat fighters rolling off assembly lines by the hundreds, and young Americans who learned to fly in Kansas wheat fields now ruling the sky. And the men flying them have names you should know. Butch O'Hare, who shot down 5 Japanese bombers in 4 minutes off Lexington and saved his entire task force. David McCampbell, who will one day shoot down 9 enemy planes in a single mission. Alex Vrashu, who thumbs his nose at a Japanese destroyer from 50 feet and lives to tell it. The Japanese are learning the Pacific just got too small to hide from the United States Navy. Right now, spring 1943, 16 fast new American carriers are forming up under a quiet, cigar-chewing admiral named Mark Mitcher. Task Force 58. More than 1,000 brand-new planes. Enough firepower to erase entire fleets before breakfast. They're heading west. And the first place they're going to introduce themselves is a little speck called Tarawa. When those 16 flight decks turn into the wind and launch the biggest air armada the world has ever seen, something is about to break forever. Japan's admirals are going to look up at the sky and realize the war they thought they were winning ended a long time ago. But that's the moment you have to see for yourself. Because what happens next at Tarawa, at the Philippine Sea, at Leyte Gulf, it's the most unstoppable avalanche of sea power in history, and it's crewed by kids from Iowa farms and Brooklyn streets who just decided the Pacific belongs to freedom. And when the first wave of Hellcats roars overhead and the Japanese look up in absolute horror, you'll understand exactly why the Emperor's Navy never stands a chance again. November 20th, 1943. Dawn breaks red over BTO Island, Tarawa Atoll. 2 miles of coral reef and Japanese concrete. Every square yard zeroed in by machine guns, every lagoon entrance mined, every beach covered by artillery scraped from every corner of the empire. The Japanese commander boasts that 1,000,000 men in 1,000 years could not take Tarawa. 16 American fleet carriers lie just over the horizon. Task Force 58. Mitcher's Monsters. Essex, Yorktown, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Intrepid, Cabot, and 10 more brand-new flat tops bristling with 900 fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes that have never tasted combat. Their decks hum like angry beehives. At 0500 the battleships open up. 16-inch shells scream overhead like freight trains. The sky turns white with high explosive. Then silence. Then the voice every Marine in the Higgins boats has been waiting for crackles over the loudspeaker. Launch the Hellcats. Launch everything. The first wave of F-6FS climbs into the dawn sun, 400 of them, blue paint gleaming. Below them, the boys of the 2nd Marine Division, kids who were seniors in high school when Pearl Harbor burned, stand in the bows of their Amtraks, helmets low, rifles high, hearts hammering. 19-year-old Private First Class Norman Hatch, combat cameraman, looks at the beach and mutters the Lord's Prayer under his breath. He's about to film something no American has ever seen before. The Hellcats roll in. They come down in a black swarm, 500-pound bombs falling like hail. Japanese anti-aircraft guns open up, but the new Grumman fighters just roll through the flak and strafe everything that moves. In 20 minutes the sky over BTO is American territory. One Marine watching from a destroyer turret starts crying because he's never seen anything so beautiful in his life. Then the landing craft hit the reef. Too soon. The tide charts are wrong. Hundreds of boats ground 500 yards from shore. Marines spill out into chest-deep water under a curtain of fire. Japanese machine guns open up in perfect crossfire. Men fall before they clear the reef. Corporal John Spillman, 8th Marines, grabs a wounded buddy and starts wading. Bullets snap the water around them. He drags the kid 50 yards through hell and collapses on the sand, only to realize the boy died halfway in. Spillman just sits there for a minute, holding his friend, whispering, "I'm sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry." By noon the beach is a slaughter pen. Bodies float in the surf. Amtraks burn. Yet the Marines keep coming. Lieutenant Alexander Bonner, 1st Battalion, 2nd Marines, stands up on the seawall, stands up in plain sight, and waves his men forward. Japanese bullets kick sand around his boots. He never flinches. Every man who sees him remembers that moment for the rest of his life. Bonner makes it to the first line of Japanese bunkers and personally wipes out 3 machine gun nests with grenades and his .45 before a mortar takes him. They bury him where he fell. Overhead the carrier planes never stop. Whenever Japanese guns open up, a Hellcat is there 30 seconds later. Ensign Paul Garrison from Essex dives so low his prop chews palm fronds off the trees. He drops his bomb straight down a Japanese blockhouse ventilator shaft and pulls out at 20 feet. His gunner, aviation machinist's mate 3rd Class Jimmy Thatch's little brother, yells over the intercom, "Did you see that? We just delivered its special delivery." By nightfall the Marines have a toehold 600 yards deep and 1,000 yards wide. It cost them 1,500 casualties in one day. But BTO is cracked. The Japanese commander radios Tokyo, "The strength of the American attack is beyond imagination." The next morning the carriers launch again. And again. And again. 476 straight hours. Task Force 58 keeps the sky full of American wings. Japanese reinforcements trying to cross from nearby islands never make it. Carrier Avengers turn the lagoon into a shooting gallery. On the third day the Marines raise the flag over a burning Japanese command post. Private First Class Richard Hayne, telephone lineman from Pittsburgh, cuts the Japanese phone lines and splices in an American field phone so he can call the USS Maryland and say the words every sailor offshore has been waiting to hear: "Send us more ammo and tell the carriers thank you. We couldn't have done this without them." Tarawa falls in 76 hours. A place the Japanese said would take 1,000,000 men 1,000 years is taken by 18,000 Marines and the biggest air fleet the world has ever seen. The cost is brutal: 1,000 dead Marines, 2,000 wounded, but the message is unmistakable: nowhere in the Pacific is safe anymore. Not one island. Not one atoll. The fast carriers can put 1,000 planes over any beach, any day, any time they choose. And the Japanese know it. February 1944. The next stop is Kwajalein in the Marshall Islands. This time the carriers don't just soften the defenses, they erase them. For 3 straight days Hellcats and Dauntless pound the islands until there isn't a palm tree left standing. Marines land against almost no resistance. One battalion commander steps ashore, looks around at the moonscape the Navy flyers created, and just shakes his head. "Boys, I think the Navy just took this island for us." The Japanese High Command holds an emergency meeting in Tokyo. Admiral Nagumo, the man who led the Pearl Harbor strike, stands up and tells the room something they never thought they'd hear from a Japanese officer: "We can no longer stop the American carriers. They appear where they want, when they want. Our fleet is blind against them." The room sits in silence. Because every man there knows he's right. June 15, 1944. The Marianas. Saipan, Tinian, Guam, the islands that will one day host B-29 bases within bombing range of Tokyo itself. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa sails with 9 Japanese carriers to stop the invasion. He still believes in the decisive battle, the old way, one massive clash that will destroy the American fleet. Admiral Raymond Spruance knows he's coming. Mitcher begs to take the fast carriers west and attack first. Spruance says no. He wants the beachhead protected at all costs. So Task Force 58 waits, grumbling, flight decks pointed into the wind. June 19, 1944. 4 massive Japanese air raids, hundreds of planes, come in from the west. American radar picks them up 150 miles out. Mitcher turns to his chief of staff and says 4 words that become legend: "Hell, this is it." He turns the task force into the wind and says the other words every aviator on every deck has been waiting years to hear: "Launch 'em all." 7 carriers empty their decks in 12 minutes. 450 Hellcats rise like angry hornets. What happens next the Navy will call the Marianas Turkey Shoot, and it isn't even close. Lieutenant Alex Vrashu shoots down 6 Japanese Judas in 8 minutes. Commander David McCampbell bags 7 before lunch. Ensign Wilbur Webb flames 3 valves, runs out of ammo, then buzzes a 4th so close the Japanese pilot panics and flies straight into the water. When it's over, the Japanese have lost more than 300 planes in a single day. American losses: 29. The Japanese pilots who make it back land on Guam, jump out of their cockpits, and just sit on the ground crying. One of them, a 22-year-old ensign, looks at his squadron commander and asks, "Sir, where did they get so many fighters? The sky was full of them." The commander has no answer. That night Ozawa's carriers run for their lives. American submarines tear into them. Taiho and Shokaku go down in flames. The next day Mitcher finally gets his chance. He launches every plane with enough fuel for a one-way trip. 216 bombers and fighters chase the Japanese 600 miles over the horizon. They find them at dusk, low on fuel, light fading. Mitcher makes the call that wins the Pacific War. He turns on every light on every ship, searchlights, floodlights, even the 5-inch guns firing starshells, so his pilots can find home in the dark. Pilots land with empty tanks, engines coughing to a stop as they catch the last wire. Some ditch beside the destroyers. Sailors dive overboard to haul them out of the water. One pilot, Lieutenant William Leverett, runs out of fuel 20 miles short, ditches, climbs in his raft, and watches the entire task force steam toward him with every light blazing like Broadway. He starts laughing and can't stop. They fish him out at midnight and hand him a cup of coffee and the Medal of Honor paperwork. Japan loses 3 more carriers that day. 5 in 48 hours. Their naval air arm is finished. Destroyed. Gone. Back in Tokyo, the news hits like a bomb. Emperor Hirohito asks his naval aide a simple question: where is our fleet? The aide cannot answer. There is no fleet left. The road to Tokyo is wide open. American carriers own the Western Pacific. Marines are already waiting ashore on Saipan while carrier planes fly overhead like guardian angels. And somewhere off in the distance, Admiral Bill Halsey is forming up an even bigger force, 3rd Fleet, Task Force 38, ready to take the war all the way to the Philippines. But that's when something happens that nobody, not Nimitz, not Spruance, not even the Japanese, sees coming. Something so enormous, so perfectly timed, and so completely American that it will end the Imperial Navy forever in a single afternoon. You're not ready for what's about to hit Leyte Gulf. Because when Halsey's carriers turn south and the biggest fleet in the history of the world starts steaming straight for the heart of the empire, the Japanese are going to throw everything they have left into one last desperate gamble. And 18 American fleet carriers are about to answer with everything we've got. October 1944. The Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur stands on the bow of the cruiser Nashville staring at the beach where he was forced to leave his men 2 years ago. He promised them he would return. Today he keeps that promise. Behind him, stretching to the horizon in every direction, is the greatest armada ever assembled. 638 American ships. 18 fleet carriers. 8 light carriers. Hellcats and Corsairs and Avengers stacked wingtip to wingtip on decks that never stop moving. Task Force 38 under Admiral Bill Halsey, 16 of those fleet carriers, rides the wind like wolves on the hunt. 2 more carrier groups support the landings directly. The Japanese look out from Leyte and see the ocean itself has turned blue with American steel. They decide to gamble everything on one throw. Operation Shogo. The last hope of the Imperial Navy. They split their remaining fleet into 3 separate forces and try to catch the Americans in a giant pincer. Center Force under Admiral Kurita with the super battleships Yamato and Musashi comes straight down from the north. Northern Force, 4 carriers and a handful of planes, acts as bait far to the north. Southern Force sneaks through Surigao Strait at night. The plan is perfect on paper. But paper doesn't win wars. American courage does. October 23rd. American submarines Darter and Dace catch Kurita's center force in the Palawan Passage at dawn. Lieutenant Commander Dave McClintock in Darter puts 4 torpedoes into Kurita's flagship Otago. She sinks in 18 minutes. Kurita swims for his life and is fished out of the water by a destroyer. 2 more heavy cruisers go down before breakfast. The Japanese are rattled before the real battle even starts. October 24th. Halsey's carrier planes find Musashi and Yamato south of Luzon. 4-5 straight hours wave after wave of Hellcats, Avengers, and Helldivers hammer the biggest battleships ever built. Lieutenant Junior Grade Ken Glass drops his torpedo dead center into Musashi's bow and pulls out so low his gunner counts rivets. Musashi takes 19 torpedoes and 17 bombs. She rolls over and dies at dusk, her emperor's flag still flying. 1 Japanese sailor swims through burning oil for 6 hours and is picked up by an American destroyer. When they ask him why he didn't give up, he says, "I had to see if the stories about American carriers were true." Then he looks at the horizon full of flat tops and starts crying. That night the Southern Force runs straight into hell at Surigao Strait. Admiral Jesse Oldendorf waits with 6 old battleships raised from Pearl Harbor mud, West Virginia, Maryland, Mississippi, Tennessee, California, Pennsylvania. They cross the T like Nelson at Trafalgar. Radar fire control. 16-inch guns that never miss. The Japanese lose 2 battleships and 3 cruisers in what sailors still call the last battleship versus battleship shootout in history. Admiral Nishimura goes down with his flagship Yamashiro still firing. His last radio message is simple: we are charging ahead to fulfill our duty. Now, everything depends on the morning of October 25th. Halsey takes the bait. Scout planes report Japanese carriers far to the north, Ozawa's decoy force with almost no planes left. Halsey smells blood. He grabs every carrier in Task Force 38 and races north at 30 knots, leaving the San Bernardino Strait completely unguarded. He leaves behind only the slow escort carriers of Taffy 3, 6 baby flattops and a handful of destroyers, under Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague. Their call sign is simple and perfect: Taffy 3, 0500, October 25th. Lookouts on the escort carrier Gambier Bay spot pagoda masts on the horizon. Then more. Then the entire Japanese center force, 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, 11 destroyers, steaming straight at them at 25 knots. Yamato leads the line. Her 18-inch guns can fire clear over the horizon. Sprague's voice comes over the TBS comm as Sunday morning: we are being chased by Japanese battleships. All ships launch everything you have and make smoke. We're going to give them hell. The destroyers Johnston, Hull, and Samuel B. Roberts and destroyer escort Roberts turn straight toward the Japanese heavy cruisers and open fire with 5-inch popguns. Lieutenant Commander Ernest Evans on Johnston, part Cherokee, part Navy through and through, keys the mic and says the words every sailor in the fleet will remember forever: we're making a torpedo run. The captain is leading the way. Give 'em hell, boys. Johnston charges alone through a rain of 14-inch shells. Evans zigzags at 40 knots, fires all 10 torpedoes point-blank into the cruiser Kumano and takes her bow clean off. Shells straddle Johnston again and again. One finally finds her. Evans loses 2 fingers on his left hand, but keeps conning his ship until another shell takes his shirt off and leaves him standing naked on the bridge covered in blood. He never stops giving orders. Hull fights until every gun is silent and every torpedo gone. Captain Leon Kintberger gives the order to abandon ship. As Hull rolls over, her crew stands on the hull and cheers the escort carriers still running. Samuel B. Roberts, little destroyer escort the sailors call Sammy B., steams straight at the heavy cruiser Chokai. Guns fire so fast the barrels glow red. One 5-inch shell hits Chokai's bridge and kills every officer on it. A 14-inch shell from Battleship Congo finally finds Sammy B. and breaks her back. Her skipper, Lieutenant Commander Robert Copeland, steps into the water and says, "Well, boys, we gave 'em a good fight." The escort carriers run for their lives, launching every plane they have, Wildcats and Avengers armed with nothing heavier than depth charges. Pilots take off knowing they may never land again. One pilot, Lieutenant Junior Grade Thomas Lupo from St. Louis, flies straight at Yamato with nothing but a .30 caliber machine gun in his Wildcat. He empties every round into her bridge and pulls away, laughing over the radio. "I just told the biggest battleship in the world to go to hell." The Japanese gunners can't believe what they're seeing. American destroyers charging battleships. Planes attacking with machine guns. Smoke everywhere. Torpedoes in the water. They start shooting at everything that moves, including each other. Kurita thinks he's up against the entire Third Fleet. He has no idea he's fighting 7 small carriers and a handful of destroyers who simply refuse to quit. After 2.5 hours of the most lopsided courage in naval history, Kurita breaks off. He turns north and runs. Yamato never fires her main guns in anger at another ship. The most powerful battleship ever built is chased off by destroyers 1/10 her size and pilots with nothing left but guts. Gambier Bay sinks. Johnston sinks. Hull sinks. Samuel B. Roberts sinks. 2,000 American sailors go into the water. But Taffy 3 saves the invasion. MacArthur lands on Leyte that afternoon and wades ashore just like he promised. Far to the north, Halsey finally catches Ozawa's decoy carriers and sinks every one of them. The Imperial Japanese Navy's carrier force dies for good in a few hours of easy killing. When the sun sets on October 25, 1944, Japan has lost 3 battleships, 4 carriers, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. The Empire's navy is finished. The sea road to Tokyo is wide open. Back home the news hits the papers. Americans crowd church pews and barstools crying over boys with names like Evans and Copeland and Lupo who just wrote the last great chapter of surface ship warfare with nothing but smoke, 5-inch guns, and raw American heart. Admiral Nimitz sends one simple message to the fleet: the world wonders. And the world does wonder. How do you beat a navy that charges battleships with destroyers? How do you stop pilots who attack with empty guns? How do you fight men who keep their promise to come back? You don't. Because from this day forward the fast carrier task forces own every ocean on Earth. From Leyte they steam north to Iwo Jima, then Okinawa, then straight to Tokyo Bay itself. Every island, every harbor, every Japanese ship still afloat lives only as long as the United States Navy decides it can. The Emperor's admirals meet one last time in a bomb shelter under Tokyo. They have nothing left. No carriers. No planes. No fuel. No hope. And somewhere off Leyte, a destroyer sailor floating on a raft watches the stars come out and hears the drone of returning aircraft overhead. He looks up at the Hellcats circling home to the big carriers and whispers the words every man in the fleet is thinking tonight. We did it, boys. We really did it. Japan started this war with 6 fleet carriers and the best naval air arm in the world. America ends it with over 100 carriers and boys who simply refused to lose. The Imperial Japanese Navy is shattered, broken, and gone forever. And the flag that flies over every American flight deck tonight is the same one that flew over Pearl Harbor, over Midway, over Guadalcanal, over Tarawa, over Leyte. It never went down. Not once. That's the story of how a nation of farmers and factory kids built the greatest fleet the world has ever seen, put it in the hands of the bravest men who ever wore the uniform, and took back every inch of ocean the enemy ever stole. From this moment on the Pacific belongs to freedom. And it always will. God bless every sailor, marine, and pilot who made it possible. And God bless the United States Navy. We'll never see their like again.